My name is Mike Plotkin. I'm one of the senior SEs at eFolder. How many of you guys saw Sam talk earlier? He's presenting the Cloud Finder. Cool. I think that was his first or second time, so got it out of him. So he mentioned a lot. I just want to take a show of hands. I mean, how many of you are familiar with Office 365, Salesforce, or using it in-house? Know people that are using it? Are you guys doing anything with backups with them? Not yet. Okay, that's a good answer. Anybody have thought about backing it up and using any other software solution means to back up Office 365 data or Salesforce data for that instance? Salesforce data? What do you, just CV dumps or Office 365? And you're backing it up with SharePoint or some other, you're not? Okay. So once I figure out my login, I will demo this for you and we'll go through a few scenarios. I think I have about 30 minutes, so that should be plenty. And if you guys want to jump up and go off on tangents, questions, I'm more than happy to go into the weeds of things, but I'll try to keep it high level. Let me share this out. I don't have a clicker or anything right now, and my next source, so it's going to be tough for me to turn this way, but I'll do my best. So, just out of the bat, give you a high-level 15-minute overview, and then we can go through some scenarios, restores, and stuff like that. So I'm going to focus this on Office 365 because I think that's primarily the biggest one out there. That at least that's what I find that most people use. After that is Salesforce, then Google Apps, and then Boxes down there somewhere. But not to say that you don't need to. It's just that that's what we found in our sales cycle. That's what mostly is used. So to set this up is very easy. It's all SaaS-based. There's no software to run locally. You don't need to provision any servers, hardware. You don't need to allocate resources to it. It's all API, so it's SaaS to SaaS. All you need is to provide some permissions within one of the SaaS services that you're using to back up to allow for Cloud Finder to make that authentication and then make the resulting REST and bulk API calls. And that's really what we do. So. It's very simple. We have documentation on that. I'm not going to bore you with how to set up an impersonation role within Office 365. We back up all instances of Office 365. So whether you're on small business or E1 or even E4, we'll back it up for you. And as Sam mentioned, it's that SharePoint's got retention policies. But a lot of times you find is many people only use 5 to 10% of SharePoint capabilities. And you really have to have a dedicated admin to administer SharePoint. It's labor intensive, time cumbersome, and if that person leaves the company for whatever reason, it's a capital drain. It's a brain drain because he's the one that knew how to set it up, legal holds, discovery management, permissions and whatnot, all that. And you can't, and SharePoint does have some retention policy in it. It can get pretty granular, but it also can get very expensive on the management side of it, setting it up, and on the storage cost as well. Also, OneDrive has limitations in the folders, the amount of folders you can create, the retention policy with OneDrive and whatnot. And that's what we're really solving here, is that we're providing you a platform, a software solution that backs up 3 times a day. And I'll talk about some of the limitations in a little bit if you guys have questions on that. Backs up 3 times a day, contacts, emails, metadata, documents from OneDrive and whatnot, and indexes everything on the fly. So we run it in our application in our data center. We fully index everything, so it turns into an e-discovery tool. I'll show you that in a second. But we also we host all the metadata in our data center, and all your binary data is actually stored in an S3 bucket in Amazon. So it's highly redundant and highly available storage. So setting it up is very easy. And this is just, you go in here, you follow the rules, just a quick authentication. You got Google Apps, select what services you want to back up. We added this feature not too long ago, before you had to run a PowerShell script on your Office 365 environment, because now all OneDrive data is in a personal share on SharePoint. So you have to allow for that admin to have site admin permissions to it. We automate that with the script on the back end when we do the authentication for you. So it's automatically done. Most of the errors that you'll ever run into backing up data with the service providers is permission errors. So whether you didn't enable API for a certain record, for instance, in Office 365, one of the times people get errors is that you might you might have an account, but if they don't go in and actually activate their OneDrive data, that record is not built. So when we query an API and or make that query with API, that record doesn't have data in it, we ignore it. We don't back it up. It comes out as false. It's a false positive that you get in here, but it's because that user hasn't initiated their OneDrive account, and that's most likely the reason for that, or the permissions are not set. So enough of that. You can pick and choose what users you want to back up. As you can see here, Salesforce, we actually back up everything in Salesforce. You can tweak what we can and can't back up using permissions in Salesforce for that global admin and what records have API enabled and whatnot. With Office 365, Google Apps, Box, you actually can pick and choose what users you want to back up. So with Office, you wouldn't back up the service accounts, you wouldn't back up you back up the actual user accounts or the shared mailbox accounts as well. So Microsoft recently changed the way they allow for their APIs, so we can now back up shared mailboxes because there's an actual user that belongs to that shared mailbox. And that was just a indirect result of Office changing the way they make their API calls or available to them. So that's that. Once you have your user selected, again, there's different limitations in how long the initial seed will take. But after that, it's only deltas, so we only back up the changes. We capture revisions for files. We'll capture the metadata and whatnot. So there's a few ways to restore data. Well, first of all, let's talk about how we can search for specific data. As Sam also mentioned, there's times where you might have different departments that are using or what's called federated data. So they're actually, they have Google Apps, they have Salesforce, sometimes in Office 365, and there's apps that collaborate, so you have documents that you sent out with your Outlook plugin that reside in Salesforce. And sometimes you have compliance reasons, you need to know who has access to what. With this solution, we can go in and we can actually search right here at the top for specific keywords. I'll show you that in a little bit once I find a keyword to search for, otherwise I don't know what to search for. And not that you have to have a priority knowledge of that, I just don't know what's in the demo database. So you can go in and search for keywords, but let's start off with Office 365. We're going to filter through this service. So we're going to get all the data that belongs to this specific module or service. Then we can filter further by a document, email, and whatnot. I can filter by a specific user if I wanted to. And then over here, which you can't really see, but it's a little blocked off, is these would be site collections. So had I filtered through documents, all I would see in here would be SharePoint sites or restore folders and stuff like that. Don't get too married to this UI. This is completely changing in the next couple of months and a lot more eye candy, a lot more visible, a lot easier to kind of navigate. Here you kind of have to be somewhat of an admin and knowledgeable in how Salesforce works and Office 365 and how the data is presented to navigate this a little bit, and now we're changing that to make it a lot, the term KISS, right? So we want to keep it simple. So in here you can filter by specific data. Once we find what we're looking for, scroll down here, we can actually, as Sam mentioned, we index everything, so this one doesn't have any data in here. Let's try this one. There we go. So this is an email sent out, obviously just a, "Dear sir, please can recover me." That was the subject line. So if I actually was looking for this, or if you had an HR incident and you wanted to know who was talking using their email over a certain event, or you have an e-discovery situation, you want to go in, I want to go ahead and just clear everything out. So here's all that email that has that specific verbiage in it. So we can search for documents, emails, contacts, pretty much anything you want to go in. Restoring this is very simple. And I have Office 365 open on my end here. Let me just go ahead and log in, actually. So restoring this is we back it up in the same format, we store it back in the same format, and we restore it back into Office 365 in the same format. So this makes it very simple. All you really need to do is select the service that you want to restore to. And Sam also mentioned this, if you guys listen, we can actually restore data between different SaaS providers. We can't create objects, we're not going to create accounts, we're not going to do that, but we can take emails and move it to Office 365 to Google Apps. We can take documents, we can take those type of files and move them around. Yes? I want to say no. because that requires creating an actual record or object, and I don't think the API allows for that. I can see real quick, but I don't think so. No, I understand. Yeah, you wouldn't move it to Salesforce. I got that. You want to move all the meta? Yeah. We can look at it really simple, real fast. There's no well, it would help if I didn't have that filter in here. So here's this is Salesforce contact. Oh no, this is a Google. This is just the email. Click on restore. So the answer is yes. So there you go. And we can do it in mass. You can download it so it restores. Now, when it restores into Office or anything like that, we don't restore it in very unique cases, depending on who the admin is and how it was backed up. We can restore it back to the source in SharePoint. But in most cases, we will restore it into a separate root folder that we create. So when you notice here, when you do a restore, it allows you to set up a folder. That folder, depending if it's an email, it'll go into their Exchange profile, and there'll be a folder called Restore XYZ at this time, and then they just have to drag that data to where they want to. So we don't restore it directly back to the source, but we restore it back for that user. And there's a few reasons for that. We don't want to corrupt anything. We want to control the restore process. And I think it might be, in some cases, a limitation of the API and how it allows us to restore the data. But we can restore it, and then from there they just drag it into their email box, and that's it. It restores the metadata, all the permissions to it, the cookie crumb of the file path. So if you and I'm not sure why they removed it from here, but restoring it to Google Apps gives you a couple of more permissions or options in terms of restoring permissions. I think with Office 365, I'd have to look at the backend code a little bit, but with Office 365, we do restore the permissions and the metadata automatically. With Google Apps, for some reason, either their API or the way we decided to do it, you get to pick and choose whether you want to restore permissions. I think this is going to be re-exposed back into Office as well, because I can think of some unique cases where you don't want to restore permissions to files that, but I think that Office just expires it. That's why we don't have that option. Office just automatically expires a link or a share or something like that after a certain amount of time. So that's a quick nutshell. Now, this is one way of restoring data that you can go in and search for it if you have some keywords or if you have a time frame. Sam mentioned a point in time restore. So one of the ways this can be used with OneDrive is today there's a lot of extortionware, right? Primarily from Boris in Siberia somewhere. So with OneDrive, what you don't have is the ability to roll back. If your OneDrive data becomes corrupt, individual users can go into the files, right-click, restore to a previous version, and they have to do it for every single file that they have access to. I don't think SharePoint has a mass rollback feature. I'm not aware of one. So with this right here, if we're backing up your OneDrive data, we can actually go back in to a specific point in time. Not only can we go into a different version of that document, so we do capture a different versioning of it, but we can restore the most original, the most one, right back into OneDrive. So the sort of in a business continuity, I guess, fashion or disaster recovery mode, but just for the files, right? We're not fixing their computer, we're not unlocking their system, we're just restoring their files. That's one use case. Another one is if you want to, remove a user from here, or just simply restore some data within the user. So you know this user has access to the emails and stuff like that. You can pick and choose, restore the email, and you can restore it back to their inbox, or their user profile, or you can select a different user to restore it to. So we don't care who you restore it to. You just have to pick a user to restore it to. With Salesforce, it goes directly back to the path, the module, the record that it's in. How many of you guys use Salesforce? Okay, so I probably maybe, you guys, I don't know how you guys are backing it up, but I find most people just do CSV dumps, and it's better than nothing, but at the same time, if you're trying to upload back with that, or if you're not running Heroku or some kind of indexing on the back end, you can't do these kind of granularity searches. let's see. So a couple other things I wanted to show. I'm running a little low on time, but kind of covered a lot of the things. So let me jump in and see if there's any questions.
That legal search that you did had like 8,000 some odd documents and hits. Can you somehow download, export that as, I don't know, PDFs or?
Yeah.
So I can give it to my legal team and say, here, have at it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a mass export tool, so you can go in here. Right, I mean, there could be thousands of documents, right? Select this and select all matching the query. So you filter it a little more and sprinkle some more, stuff on there, and then click on action and export.
Okay, good.
And now what this does is it actually asks you like 3 times whether you want to export it. Are you sure?
Yeah,
Are you sure? Yeah. And then once that's done, it goes into here, and then you have your exports, and you just download it from here once it's completed. So we actually extracted our S3 bucket, put it into a storage on our server. That takes time. I don't know what the delay is. I know with cold storage, it's about like 4 to 6 hours or something like that. But so with S3, it's gonna be a little faster.
Very good.
Yep. Any other questions? If you're running a sandbox environment, we can back it up so we're not limited to the number of services. So you can actually migrate this, maybe apply more for Salesforce than it does with Office 365, but you can add your sandbox environment and actually migrate some production data into your sandbox to test it out before integrating other applications or whatnot. And then last but not least, reporting. Again, as I mentioned, don't get too caught up with this UI. It's going to change in the very near future. But we do audit everything. So what admin users right now, only admins have access to this. Standard users do not. So a user would have to call you guys and go, hey, I lost my file or something like that, or I can't find this document. Where does it live? That could be another reason you would use this. Auditing, so which user account did what, when did it initiate a restore. We capture all that, so for compliance reasons. And then if there's a backup occurring, you can click on it. You can see what's going on, if there's any errors or whatnot. That's that. It's very simple. Again, there's no software to install. It's all web-based. I'll take pesos, shekels, dollars, credit cards. I'm not good at jokes.
How are you priced?
We start at roughly about $1 million a month, and then it scales upwards from there. So it's very affordable.
I'm out.
Sign me up. So it's a per user cost. We bundle storage with it, so you get about 30 terabytes of storage per user pooled. We don't care how that's disseminated across the service. So it's plenty more. We've never seen anybody go above that. If you need more above that, we can work it out. But it's about $2.50, $2.25 starting at a user license for all services, and then it scales down the more users you have. So.
That $2 would include their OneDrive data,
Everything. We don't sell per module, nothing like that.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions? Any? Yes.
Customer posting promotion customer customers?
What about?
Commercial things?
Anybody with a credit card. Cloud Finder, I mean, I would say mostly commercial enterprise customers. That's what I found. But I mean, anybody that has an Office 365 or Salesforce environment would be a prospect of ours. But more so, you find more in the enterprise, higher businesses that have 500 or 1,000 accounts that can't risk losing data for whatever reason. And also this can be used as an archival tool, as I mentioned earlier a little bit. You can actually delete the data from Office or Salesforce and have it reside at a cheaper cost in Cloud Finder. If you ever need it, you can restore it back and or export it. If we support the service, so today between Google Apps, Box, and well, depends what. Documents, yes, between the apps. No, you do it yourself. No, you would go into here. So let's say I go into Salesforce. Here's a document in Salesforce, right? This probably has a PDF or something like that. But here's a document. I can click on Restore. And over here I have all the options to where I want to restore it to. So it's up to you. Correct. So we stored all the encryption key and the user information in our data center, in our database. And that's what allows us to make that authentication, so moving between different apps. You needed this like a week ago? Oh, okay. Cool, yeah. It's really not a saturated market yet. I mean, there's a few players out there. I can't say who they are. For $500 maybe. That's about it. I mean, it's a really simple solution. There's a lot of magic that happens on the back end. It's not easy to code with APIs. There's a lot of things that we have to maintain for security purposes, and also just keeping up with their tags that they make available and being able to integrate with that. So that's why we have releases every 3 weeks or so. So new features, new capabilities, backing up different, I guess I want to say records, improving the efficiency of backing up. So a lot of these SaaS-based applications have, Office 365 has a bandwidth limit, so how much data we can extract over a period of time. The other ones have API limits. Some are hard-coded, or it's a hard number, like Box is only 50,000 per day. So we have to control that. We do have that in our settings so that we don't break anything. So I don't know where I was going with this, but there was a point. I forgot. It is. It's stable. You know, we're trying to keep it simple. You guys can finish the rest of that sentence. That's it. Thank you for your time, guys. If you have any questions, I'll stick around and chat.